G'day, Matt.
Hey Paul, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good, thanks. Perfect, beautiful day here in Melbourne today. So I've got my door open. Can see some nice sun coming in. So much so that I'm in a t-shirt today. So that's good. That's nice. That's quite a change.
What's
Yeah.
the t-shirt you're wearing, by the way? Is that something special or?
Yeah, the t-shirt I'm wearing today, and Matt and I were sort of discussing that. Looking back at myself there, it's hard to see which side, but it's an AWS Bug Bust t-shirt. So for anybody that's watching the audience and has seen the releases that have come out and some of the news around AWS Bug Bust, it's the idea of like continuous improvement and a formal way to be able to track that. And Matt and I were actually just discussing right before the event. Right before the stream today, like a specific event we were thinking about setting up around bug bust and performing that against a specific open source project. But I guess it's like when you're operating in a team, a development team, and you have these items in your backlog that you want to address, bugs, issues, however they might be, selling that to your stakeholders internally can be difficult. Bug bust is a way to formalize that, and there is now a formal platform to be able to do that. And there's still competitions and prizes that are on offer through AWS at the moment. But yeah, I got my t-shirt, got that sent out last week, so I decided to wear that today. And yours looks bright and colorful. Give us the rundown on that.
Yeah, I was standing up before, but I might stand up again. But you can see I've got like Space Invaders everywhere, and a bunch of cat hair. I've had the cat sleeping on me today, but yeah, this was actually a replay t-shirt from I think 2 years ago in reInvent. So I went to like the after night events and they had free t-shirts, so I snatched one up, which is pretty cool. Not as recent or as cool as your bug bust, but yeah.
Yeah, I have that t-shirt somewhere as well. I think I wasn't able to get the right fitting size, so I think mine is quite small, and my son can wear that one sometimes as well.
Nice. Yep. Yeah, I've been running out of t-shirts recently. I need to collect some more. I managed to score a couple. I don't know, anyone in the audience love collecting gear, right? we should get some devs in the shed loot at some point, I think, to send to people that come on consistently or ask good questions or come in as a guest maybe. Like that could be pretty cool to do in the future. But yeah, and on the other side of it, I guess what's the most interesting thing that you've gotten from a particular event? I think mine, I've had a Rubik's Cube. I won an Apple Watch at one. I don't think I've had anything too amazing, but I just generally seem to collect a lot of stuff and go crazy for it at the time.
Yeah, I got a small drone once. I think me and one of my friends, we went through a period where we weren't using paper cups. I mean, I still don't. I still prefer to have a bring my own cup and make sure I use a metal water bottle. And by the way, I've got an AWS Bug Bust water bottle here today.
You're fully sorted on Bug Bust then.
Yeah, and it was a metal straw, so I had a metal straw which I use that. And we've got someone here that's won Xbox. There's some good prizes at some of those at those events. So
Quest software as well. They did Toad, if I remember correctly. Like they've got some pretty cool software. Yeah.
So Matt and I have had an interesting week. A couple of weeks ago, we set up our blog and we changed our actual devs in the shed website, and we pointed that directly at a WordPress installation. And before we go through what's new, I'll sort of introduce the topic that we were going to discuss and go through today. But it takes a lot of effort for somebody to publish content, and we sort of see that we wanted the ability, as people will talk to us and feed back information about what they'd seen in the videos, that they want something to be able to reference. So that's why we decided to augment the show with a blog as well. So to be able to have ad hoc pieces of information or something that we think had the ability to stay long term on the internet is why we set up the blog. And this week, I know Matt has spent, or the last few weeks, a bunch of time dealing with customers and CDK and how CDK wraps in with existing resources, how you should think about naming conventions, how you do specific lookups, how to use existing CloudFormation within your stack. and how closely related like CDK is, it's a programming language, so programming constructs come into place in that. So we thought that was a really interesting topic that we would be able to go through today, because we've had a number of people and a number of internal requests with customers that have come up in this area. But I guess like we'll share today, and I'll add my screen to the stream.
I'll pop it up for you now. There we go.
Yeah. So a couple of just interesting announcements that people may or may not have thought of or seen that to be interesting. But Amazon Monotron, and so there's probably a lot of people that come to the stream that don't know what Monotron is. But Monotron is a device, like an actual hardware physical device that you can deploy into your manufacturing plant, or factory, that takes in surrounding information, specifically around like movement and vibration, and can detect anomalies and send feedback, back that centralized data to your AWS platform to determine anomalies. And a really good useful area where you might see something for Monotron being used would be if you had something that was like turning, a machine that was turning constantly, and when it's operating and running well and the bearings are well lubricated, for example, that machine has a constant RPM that is not making a certain noise, or the noise is at a certain decibel. Vibrations are very minimal, but if those bearings start to dry up, or have some sort of problem and start wearing down, then you might see there's a little bit noisier, or the RPM slow down because it's a little bit harder to turn the machine, or it introduces some sort of vibration or something like that. That's where like Monotron would start sending some alerts saying something isn't quite working, and you might want to go ahead and check that out. So this week, Amazon Monotron launched an Ethernet gateway device. So in the past, it was completely wireless, and Matt and I were talking about it. It's not the most exciting like launch, but I did want to show one thing that I thought about that was useful for Monotron. So I've got this on the side here. That a while ago, where I first thought about Monotron was I had a rock tumbler, and this tumbling device would, it basically just turns a barrel very, very slowly over a long period of time. And what happened, and I didn't realize this happened, was, and I'll show you the device. So here's this device. It's a National Geographic rock tumbling device, and it has this little barrel, and the barrel just turns, and there's rocks and grit inside that.
I'm just going to remove your screen for a second. Do you want to show it a little?
I'll show it again. So
yeah, there we go.
This is the device. I'll put it back together. So this is the device here. You sort of like
just move it with more center.
Yeah, sorry. Lock this device together, and inside you can see here, like this will constantly turn. On the other side, there's a little window, so you can see inside. That was very transparent, but over time, that's gone really dull. And what was happening, like that would turn for like weeks on end. So you'd run it for a week. But what I didn't realize was happening was slowly but surely, tiny little drops of water leaked out, and that water leaked out into the little motor. The motor started causing a lot of vibration. It wore a hole in the internal mechanism there and completely destroyed the device. And it was all because the lid wasn't quite tight enough, a little drop coming out. And that's where I sort of thought, something like Monotron would have been a fun piece of hardware to attach to this, and being able to detect really early that something was wrong. So, I thought that was something that was interesting. Maybe not interesting to the devs, but interesting to people that are operating like a lot of plant machinery within like large factories. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Was there anything specific that you wanted to go through, Matt, this week?
Yeah, let me just have one quick last nose at the features. I think the others are quite weak. I was expecting like something to surprise me. Yeah, let's talk about FSX, and I'll just have one look in the background and see if I can spot anything else.
Yeah, so the FSX for Netapp on tap was released this week, and Netapp is a mechanism for providing like storage for your environments, and being able to provide this through the AWS platform means that you now have the ability to use our high performance engines and storage engines to be able to provide like really high levels of throughput and IOPS, being able to like leverage off the back of the Netapp on tap platform. And so this has come out this week, and I know that even members of my team have said that around some specific deployments and customer requirements that are working through, this release in itself has been able to provide substantially better throughput and performance for some of their storage requirements. So I thought that that was something that was useful to talk about, especially if you're going through moving maybe less cloud native applications to the cloud, and you need like a lot of storage, not a lot of quantity of storage, but you have a lot of requirement for specific storage requirements and performance around those specific storage requirements. So that's an interesting one there as well.
Yeah, I'm just having a look on my side. So there's one or two things that might be of interest that are quite recent that I missed actually today. So let's have a quick look at those, right? So I'll share my screen for a second. We'll quickly touch those. So has it popped up for everyone? Yep.
Yeah, it's come up now.
Perfect. One thing that I did find quite cool is Pinpoint now supports encrypted SNS topics for inbound SMS. This is going to be handy for some customers that I've worked with in the past that wanted this type of support when it comes to Pinpoint. So it's quite a nice feature to have. And the other thing is just because, you know, we're across the region, even though we're based in Australia, I still get really excited when I see others in APAC have access to some of the things that I'm a big fan of. And Cloud9's one of them. You know, I like to do coding on my iPad sometimes, call me crazy, but the only way I can do that effectively is to log into Cloud9, right? Like it's still not there app-wise in terms of support. Because, you know, it is a smaller device mostly made for consumption. But it's really cool, like to just be able to pick up a repository that I've got and then quickly alter a few things in Cloud9. So it's cool to see that it's come to Osaka, and then it's also come to Cape Town as well. So that's probably the main thing.
I wonder if anybody in the audience is using a web-based IDE, whether it be Cloud9 or anything else. Love to hear some feedback, because I would probably say I spend 40% of my time when I'm building prototypes or prototyping or coding with Cloud9, and the rest of the time I still naturally tend to develop locally. So what do people do? Do you still prefer to develop locally? Let us know in the chat. Excellent.
Well, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen here. As Paul mentioned, like we've done or at least I have done a ton of sessions on CDK recently. Paul's joined me for a few of those. So I feel like that's the hot topic that I've kind of been focused on the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that's really interesting is like, let us know in the chat. Like, are you software developers? Are you in DevOps? Are you within cloud teams? Because what I've found is like cloud teams are really, really comfortable working with cloud formation. And sometimes they might use other services, other products like Terraform, which is completely fine as well. But like there's a bit of a learning curve or a bit of a step to kind of get used to CDK, especially if people haven't had like a development background. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about that in particular, and kind of how to bridge that gap, because CDK is really beneficial for cloud teams as well. You know, you can deploy your CDK application, CDK infrastructure through a pipeline. You might be using Jenkins for that. You might be using like, Amazon code pipeline to do that as well. And the other thing is like with it being in the pipelines, you can kind of like lock down like what set of resources you should be able to create there. It also means that you spend less time on CloudFormation to generate infrastructure. You can deal with some of the higher level constructs that CDK has. So you go like, give me a VPC. It's like one line, right? Whereas in CloudFormation land, that might be like 50 or so lines of CloudFormation that's generated. You can attach attributes when you need like unique things to be customized for that VPC. Like you want to, in particular, create, subnets that are internet facing, for example. Maybe you want an application load balancer as well. And, like having those things like is really powerful for somebody that's like building infrastructure, because it just saves a lot of time. And it also like is almost as quick as building something in the console once you're like familiar with it. And many of us have built things directly in the console. Like when I need to prototype, I probably just click a few things in the console and have it generated, and that's completely fine. But like when you're talking about infrastructure that needs to be consistent between development, UAT, and production, that's kind of where you need to move to having a bit more rigor around like how you generate that infrastructure, how you keep it consistent, and also how you establish some of the minor changes that make it kind of semi-consistent, but are important to do to conserve on costs, because everything's a balance, right?
So it's also like self-documenting, right? So like, of course, we all balance off when I need to do something quick and test it. You do it in the console, and of course, like it's quicker, right? Unless you've got something ready to go, it's quicker to go through the console and do that.
Yeah.
But like Matt and I, we've got a fault injection simulator demonstration, and setting that up every single time took me a while to do. Now, it took me a while to convert it all to CDK and have it completely deployed with user data and everything embedded and go ahead and deploy. But the great thing is now, like I've reused that like multiple times over and over. It works, it's consistent, it works every time. And secondly, I can share that to somebody else and they can look at what I've done without me having to write, a playbook or a run book that says, go here, click here, do that, make sure this loads before I do the next step. So that's a very important thing to come.
Yeah, that's right. And what I was talking about, like infrastructure wise as well, right? You might not want like development or UAT to have like large instance sizes, but it's okay. You don't want them to have large instance sizes, but that's completely fine for production, right? So there's things that you might want to do there that you can kind of like have CDK help you with. And yeah, there's just like a ton of good stuff. Like there's way too much to kind of explain in a chat. So what I wanted to do was like take everyone through some of the learnings that I've had recently. We've written a blog on it as well, but I thought it'd be interesting for the audience to kind of come on that journey with me, and I'll show you some of the things that I really like about CDK, and also how to bridge the gap. Like we can talk about like the fact that moving to a programming language means that things are going to be more testable. You can have unit tests for the infrastructure that you generate based on like what's synthesized with CDK. That's really cool. But like the first bridge is like we've already invested in CloudFormation. Like how do I bring that into CDK, right? And then the second thing that comes in is some of the stuff that I might not have as CloudFormation, I probably don't need to rebuild it again. But like I've got consistent naming conventions, so like how would I access those things as well? Like let's say a VPC that's already configured across the 3 accounts, and so like there's some like not really well documented features in CDK that kind of help you with being able to look up existing resources like VPCs, subnets, and load balancers too. So we'll go through that. And then the other thing is like it gets confusing with CDK because it's a different way of working to CloudFormation. Like one of the gaps is like the way that identifiers work in CDK. There's 3 different types of identifiers effectively as well. So we can talk about that. Whereas in CloudFormation land, like there's one identifier, and you can use kind of like parameter mapping to like point to resources that you've gotten created in stacks. So it kind of works a little bit differently in that land too. So let's get on the tools maybe.
While you're getting set up, I'd be good, anybody in the audience going through that transition of taking existing CloudFormation and wanting to leverage that in CDK. I know that it does happen constantly internally, and so there's a number of different people internally that are always asking like, what can customers do in this area? How do we take those existing CloudFormation snippets and being able to use that within CDK? What should we do? Should we start again? Should we move forward? So it'd be nice to hear whether people have just rewritten everything in CDK or they're still looking at taking the half. And I think that depends from team to team. If you have a developer background, you're probably going to be very familiar with programming constructs, so it's easier to get across. If you're familiar with CloudFormation and you know how to program well, going to CDK is a natural fit. But maybe some of the operational teams that you've said, it's not so straightforward when you're moving across the CDK.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got Tony wants to move from Troposphere to CDK.
Nice. One of the difficulties, like I actually haven't used Troposphere to be honest, but one of the things I've noticed with some of the third-party tools is that, like, rather than generating CloudFormation, which is what you can kind of leverage with CDK under the hood, like it's actually using CLI commands sometimes. So it's a bit more difficult to move between, whatever it is that other providers like using that maintains state of your infrastructure and using CDK itself. And there's a bit of a bridge with like Terraform adopting CDK and Terraform having their own implementation of CDK as well. So that kind of helps some people in that that kind of space. But I actually haven't looked at Troposphere. Have you had much dealings with it, Paul?
No, absolutely nothing. Just like you.
Yeah. I've usually found, like, third-party wise, mostly I've had customers that are using Terraform, right? So I kind of point them to Terraform CDK. It is a little bit different. It is in developer preview, but I know that a lot of people love that product as well, which is cool.
Yep.
So I've got my IDE open. Not Cloud9. I should be using Cloud9 actually in this instance, but I thought let's very quickly work from here. And so kind of what I want to do is I want to start a new CDK project. You can see what I've written in the blog. I've actually got the resources here already. So I'm basically just going to redo the same for everyone. So you can see kind of like what I did.
I'll post it in the blog to the chat as well.
Cool. Yeah. So like basically I'm just going to make a new directory within my development folder where I have all my stuff over time. And I'm just going to call it CDK, what am I going to call this? CDK devs in the shed. Like I lack creativity today. And then I'll probably just CD into that directory so I can operate here. Actually, no, wait. What I might do is I might just go straight into that folder in VS Code. That way you don't have to see all my other projects. Yep, there we go. Looks like that worked. I'll open up my terminal, and the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a CDK initialize command. So that's CDK init. I'm going to build an app. That app is going to be using Python as a language. Let's go with that. I can spell today. So if I was using TypeScript or whatever, I'd just change that simply there. So it should generate the shell that I want. There we go. So you can see that all this stuff's auto-generated from CDK in the background. So I ran that command. It's given me a source.bat file for if I was using Windows and I wanted to work in a virtual environment. So it's created that for me already, which is quite handy. So that means that whatever I install that's related to my CDK project is just going to be unique to this folder. It's not going to interfere with other things that I've got happening in Python across the operating system. So that's nice. Similar to NPM packages, right? It's generated a requirements folder for me as well. It's empty. It's given me a README. It's given me a git ignore. So it's given me a whole bunch of like basics, which is cool. cdk.json. So this is a little bit different. We did an overview of like CDK version 2 a couple of weeks ago. It might be worth like linking to that episode as well, Paul, in the background.
Yep. I'll do that.
But like a lot of the context stuff isn't really needed. There's only 4 flags like in CDK in the future. So this file is going to kind of be minimized, less important over time. And then it's also generated an app.python, right? And within that app, it's basically got this stack. So this stack here, and that stack lives within the CDK devs in the shed folder. So this is where I'd kind of edit it actually. I'd go in here and any code that I want to change for the stack that I'm creating, I'm actually going to put underline 16 here. So app's basically initializer. But then all the magic and all the work actually happens in this particular stack file that I've got in the subfolder. Yeah, TypeScript's good, JavaScript's good, Python's good, everything's good. To be honest, one blog I did in Python, the other blog I did in JavaScript. I feel like I've gotten to that point where it's just like whatever I feel like using, I'll just jump to on the day. I feel like Python's like easily readable though. So like I guess when I'm doing streaming or I want to explain something, it's probably like really you know, easy to convey some of the ideas to everyone. Yeah, thanks, Paul, for the link. So yeah, I've got this project here, right? And the only thing that I might want to do in my app .py is I could like point to an existing environment. So I could point to like the dev shed account if I wanted to. And the way that I do that is I just make like a quick little object to reference. So I'll go like existing environment. And, you know, like this is going to look at coordinate environment, configuration details. And then like there's going to be two things that I'd feed in here, right? There'll be an account, and that will be a string. And then I'm also going to have like a region as well. So that's going to be a string. Being in Australia, that's going to be AP Southeast 2. And the accounts, I'm going to have to look up in the background. I might choose one of the random accounts that I've got. So I'll put that in there. Now, what I might want to do with this is I need to load this in. Like, so when the app's initialized, it's going to load these settings here. There is a lot of stuff in here, right? So what I might do is I might just remove all of it. It's all junk. And what I might do is I might just break these out. Like I like readability, right? So I'll just break these out so they make sense to me, and then I'll load in that existing environment settings within the environment, within the app.py file. So basically it's going to know what region I'm operating in, and then it's just going to know what account I'm operating in. And I think I'm missing a comma here, so I'll just drop that in. I think that's why IntelliSense isn't liking what I've got. So yeah, so all that we're going to do is just like a bit of the groundwork first, right? And then we'll like look at referencing some existing CloudFormation that I've got. And so, you know, like working on the groundwork, the next thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to do like a ton of like AWS imports for what I want. I might do those as I go, actually thinking about it. So I might just do a wrap so I can add them in later. I'll start with core, but I'm going to need probably like IAM, EC2, S3, and a bunch of other things. So that's done there. Now, like I need to bootstrap the app. So I'm going to connect it to that AWS environment with Bootstrap. I think this only needs to be done once when you use CDK. And let's see what's gone wrong here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just about to say I do need to install AWS _ CDK. Maybe I'll just do CDK core to get started. Looks better. Looks like we did have a bit of a problem there with Flask and Chalice, which is interesting. That is actually going to be problematic. And I think the reason why is I haven't actually like started my virtual environment, because those are all things that I've got installed at the top level of my instance of Python. When I've been naughty and I just want to erase something out. So what I need to do now is I need to basically do, what's that venv command as well? I always forget it.
What wasn't it in when you first opened the file? Wasn't it in one of those files that tells you what to do? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's that. But we're on Mac, so I think it's something like that. So I never do it often enough to remember what it is. I might just have a quick nose at one of my other files.
.vn, like just use your look aheads with tab, because it's in that .vm file. Once I see it, I'll remember it. It's like VM source activate or something like that.
Oh, it is scripts activate, right? So, okay. Like that, I've got to remember what the command is. Give me 2 seconds. I'll just steal it from another project, right? bin activate. There we go. Or I'll have some help in the chat. Let's
Thanks,
go
Tony.
with that. Yeah.
Once you've activated that, installed that, we'll come back and I'll just read out CloudRec's question or comment here.
Yep.
So is you installing that now, Matt? Is it working?
No, it didn't work. But I'll just go new window. I'll just grab it from one of my other projects. I usually have it like auto set, so I always forget it. I think I would have done it in
history grep vn. source.vn/bin/activate.
Source. Yep, that sounds right. There we go.
I'll fix that. Thanks for that comment from you. I'll fix that now.
Yep. Yeah, there we go. So we're back in business, right? So let's do that pip install command before. I'll just navigate through my history for it.
Live coding is always fun. I'll read out CloudRec's question, Matt. CloudRec says with CDK support for Terraform, is the intent here to provide an abstraction layer for various IAC platforms, giving devs the ability to write provisioning workflows in CDK and leverage Terraform or CloudFormation to choose at deployment time?
I can't really comment on the intent, right? But what I can say is, CDK has been open sourced because we hope that it's going to be adopted by many different communities. Like we've had the Kubernetes community look to adopt it. We've had Terraform quite excited about what's happening with CDK. They've all kind of like forked it and then like implemented their own versions of CDK for whatever it is they do in particular. So like if you look at the Kubernetes implementation, like it's quite different in terms of like its intent. If you look at like Terraform, it's not really like compatible with like standard. Like it's not going to create like CloudFormation outputs, right? It doesn't really perform the same function as what we've got with CDK here. But the intent was like, I think we created a pretty cool tool, and then it's like other people can leverage this to build assets. And the other thing is like with open source JSII, which is used to create repeatable, reusable JavaScript code that can be compiled to like a Python wheel or like a Maven file in Java. And then it can be used in other projects. So you can kind of like use the construct that you've created with CDK here, but you can use it across different apps. I think that's probably the best. Yeah.
JSII, for anybody that has never seen or heard of what that is while it is like tightly linked to CDK and is how AWS is able to produce CDK in so many different languages, what it means and what it provides for you as a team is that you have the ability to build your constructs in CDK and it's specific to TypeScript, but be able to build your constructs within TypeScript and then cross-compile them to produce like native artifacts that other languages can consume, such as .NET, Java, Python, JavaScript. So it can convert in your language into other languages. JSII doesn't just work for CDK, it works for other languages, but it's very well suited to CDK because with CDK as a language, or the implementation of CDK, we don't really care about performance and we don't care about bloat. We just care that it's easy to use and provides that level of abstraction on top of CloudFormation. So it's very well suited. If people are interested in that, maybe we could do a session on JSII because I have some sample applications that we could show how that works.
Yeah, you've done a ton on JSII. It's quite interesting. One of the things that we kind of want to do in the future, I don't know if we're ever going to have enough time because there's like an infinite list of things that we want to do. But like we wanted to kind of like create a little bit of a course around CDK. Go into some of the advanced things that we've seen multiple customers talk about. Like we're writing a blog for now, but maybe that could be extended into a fun lab for everyone. So we're talking to a couple of people internally about potentially doing that as well. So that might come later. So we've got a lot of stuff that we're kind of like working on the CDK landscape. So anyways, I changed my account. You might have seen in the background. This machine's linked to this particular account at the moment with AWS CLI and this and that. Couldn't be bothered changing all the settings. I actually don't know what this account is, but it seems to work. So we'll stick with that for now. And I did a CDK bootstrap successfully. So like that's connected to my account once and created like all the bootstrapping, like CloudFormation stuff and a bucket and a few other things like in my account, like ready for me to basically like use CDK against my particular accounts in my region. So that's kind of gone fine, as you can see. Now, if I wanted to see what happens if I do a CDK synth command at the moment, I could run that. CDK synth is effectively just like giving me an output of what CDK is going to create in my particular account. So it creates the CDK out folder. And at the moment, not too much exciting is happening there, right? Like it kind of generated 4 files. The main file that I care about is this .json file. And you can see here, like this is kind of like where it looks very similar to CloudFormation because in fact it is, but you know, like it's creating like the resources. And at the moment, there's 0 resources sitting within here because we haven't actually done anything yet. So maybe we move on to adding a resource in, and I can show you what a synth command looks like afterwards. You can see the CloudFormation generated, and you can see how the IDs change as well in there. So like, let's get into business, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some existing CloudFormation within my application. And the reason why I want to do that is I want to then like try and load that in and generate CloudFormation out on the other side. It's a little bit ironic, but you know, a lot of customers are using like existing CloudFormation, so they want to use that within CDK. So this shows them how, and they can see like how that CloudFormation is taken in. You can do stuff with CDK on top, and then it's going to output CloudFormation again as well. So it's actually pretty cool. So I'm going to create a new JSON file in here. And I'm just going to call this like, you know, like CF it's free bucket maybe .json. And like, this is just going to be very similar to like the normal setup that you've got for CloudFormation, right? So you kind of have like this tree. You have resources within that tree. In the resources, like we're going to create that bucket. And I'm simply going to call it my bucket. I'll keep it very simple. I'm not going to give it a unique name or anything like that. But the bucket is going to be of type. And this is where I need to give it the type of AWS S3 buckets. So it knows it's a bucket object. And then I'm going to give it some properties. Maybe not. I'll just leave this as empty, but I think it's required if I remember correctly. It's going to be an empty array there. So like this should be CloudFormation to create a very, very simple bucket that doesn't really do anything, right? At the end of the day. But I'm going to show you how you can load that in to the CDK application that we've got here. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in this other library as part of the CDK stack called CF CloudFormation include. And I'm going to have to do an import to do this as well. So let me just get the library right as well. I'll get that imported, and I'm going to have to do an npm install as well, or a pip install. There we go. Include as I want to call it that. So I'll go there, and I might just have a comma, and I will quickly do an install before I get further with it. So this is going to be like a pip install AWS-CDK, if I remember correctly, and then CloudFormation include. But the bracket goes in the middle. It looks like I did that correctly, which is good.
And just by the way, like your CloudFormation is in JSON. This works just the same if it was YAML.
It can be YAML as well, like, yeah. Yep. So whatever your existing CloudFormation's in, like YAML or JSON, like you can still load it in using this method as well. Yeah, it's taking a little longer than I expected, but it'll get there. And what that should open up for me, right, is I should then have access to do a CFN include and then load in that CloudFormation.
So I guess this is a good opportunity when we think about CDK version 2 that we're not going to have to continually do this all the time, that we're going to have it from the get-go. Yep. A larger initial hit, but we'll have all the packages available to us immediately. Yeah, and I posted that blog post earlier, but I also posted, the show episode of CDK version 1 to 2, but I also posted the pull request that shows the diff file by file for every single change that we have to make to ensure that stack ran in CDK v2.
Yeah, I really like that it's all in one stack, right? Because I find like, with this, we're probably going to install like 7 or 8 packages, like sub packages. So it's just nicer to have access to everything from the get-go, so I can start building. And then, like, because this is generating infrastructure and it's not an app, it's not really going to increase my app size. So I'm not too worried about that, right?
Yep.
So that's done. Looks like the library is included and IntelliSense isn't upset with me, which is always a good sign. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go CFN include, and then like within this, I'm basically going to have it's going to be self and template I'm using. So just defining the properties. You'll find this like for most things that you do, like with CDK, is like usually you have self set within the Python world or this or whatever in Python. JavaScript, then you have the name of like whatever it is that you're using. So this could be like a descriptive name that I give things as well. We'll actually go into that in the bucket side in a second, or when we create another resource. But like the next thing is like you would then load in like your template file, right? So template file equals, and then like this is where we'll have that folder. CDK devs in the shed, and then we'll go like / and then what did I name that file? CDK CF -s3 bucket JSON. So that should load that in here. That should look good, I'm hoping. Why is that complained? That's okay. And then the other thing that I need to do is I need to have like, this is an option that actually, no, we don't need this option. Like you can have like a preserve logical IDs if you want to keep like the absolute name of like whatever it is that's the CloudFormation that you're loading in. So this is basically like, I'll show you guys actually, I might as well. So preserve logical IDs. This could be a flag that you set to true if you wanted to, if you wanted to preserve like the absolute name of the bucket that you've got. But you can leave this out or leave this as false if you want to as well. So it's up
What's
to
the default, Matt?
It defaults to false, if I remember correctly. So like usually like CDK is going to give whatever it is like its own distinctive like name and hash when it generates the CloudFormation resources.
Yep.
Yep. So what we're going to do now,
naming resources with CDK is a topic on its own, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Like, yeah. So that was part of what I wanted to show here, right? So so I just call it existing bucket. It's going to be a level 1 construct because it's like low level CloudFormation. So I'll just go like, that should equal like the template that I've created, which is loading in this CloudFormation file. So so I'm going to load in the template, but then there's this get resource command that I can have. And then I can be like descriptive on like what it is that I'm loading in. So it's going to be my bucket. And this is handy like if you need to pick up multiple resources. So like you might go like get this Lambda or get this like bucket or get this VPC or whatever it is in a very large file where you've got lots and lots of resources.
That could
And
be
then,
useful in a migration, or not a migration. If you had an existing service and version 2 of that service was being built out, or an extension to that service, and you said, at this point in time, I still want to reference the existing CloudFormation, and that's great, but we're continuing to evolve this service. So piece by piece, I want to cherry pick out bits of different resources out. So you can leave the CloudFormation in its exact form, in its original form from day one, and not have to worry about trimming it out, but just selectively pick out the resources that you want to go and modify or import.
Yep. Now, the next thing is, if I wanted to abstract this away to be used with other CDK constructs, the reason why I created a level 1 construct is because if I go and create a level 2 construct using this level 1 construct, I can suddenly use it in lambdas and other things quite simply. So this existing L2 construct is going to kind of follow this S3, and I'm going to have to do an install again for this. So it's going to be a pip install S3 or D3 if I mistype. I'm doing really bad on the typing today. Maybe it's AWS S3. Let me. Yeah, there we go.
Live coding is always tough.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'll also want to load that in too, right? So I'm going to go AWS underscore in the Python world. S3 as S3, right? And then I can access that resource. There we go, as S3. And so now you can see it's picked up that module, that class, and then I can go buckets, and IntelliSense helping me out here. Actually, I think, yeah, it is just that. On my other machine, I've been playing with Tab 9 just for a bit of fun to see how that works, and experimenting with a few other products like that. So it's going to be from bucket name, right? Because we're going to give it the name. And then it's going to be self again. And then it's going to be bucket. And then we're going to pick up that existing bucket and the reference. And so that's going to create an L2 construct for the bucket. And that, I think that means if at this step, if I remember correctly, cdkjson, if I run that command, thinking I'll get a bit more output in my file, maybe. Let's see. What is it complaining about? Doesn't like self being here. It's a bit odd. Self is not defined. Why is that the case? I'm pretty sure that's how I had it in the other one. Define self. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see it. What was it? I was quickly looking at the docs to check.
It's Python works on white space.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So I just needed the tab in, so I was operating within this function. Yep. So there we go. Now remember this. Let's try that again. That's funny. Brackets versus white space. Let's start a war. Let's see who's on what side. I don't mind.
Last question, Matt. Have you ever touched CDK in Go?
I have not. Go is one of the things I haven't played with. I've played with a bit of Dart and Flutter on that side, but I have not touched Go before. I think I've just lent on Python because it's kind of people say it's the second best language for nearly everything. So I know it's a lot slower than Go. I know that Go is pretty fast. I've played with bits and pieces of Go. It's a really cool language. But it's kind of one of those tool sets. It's just handy to know, and basically you can do so much with it, right? Whereas Go's really playing into the infrastructure world really, really well. And so I know that was a hot thing that they asked for with CDK. But I know a lot of people on cloud teams, infrastructure teams are leaning toward using Go as well. I think I could be completely talking out of my myself here, but I think the other thing was like Go was really descriptive with types as well, which was
Yeah,
quite
it is.
nice. Yep.
Yep.
So no, I haven't. Have you played with it yet? I'm suspecting not too
Not
much either,
CDK
right?
in Go at all, but Matt and I were just talking about specific different languages, and what will be interesting to see, and if it happens or not, well, like, because we've been like seeing a lot of tweets and a lot of work around Swift, and Matt is such a fan of Swift, and to see whether there's some adoption with CDK and Swift in the future.
Yeah.
I have like little experience with Swift, only just touched a couple of native apps. Most of the apps that I had built for mobile were in React Native, so JavaScript based.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I'm not too sure about the quags, right? But the thing that I kind of wish like Python would be a little bit faster for me sometimes, and I guess the other thing is like they've got the multi-processing library for like using multiple cores on my machine. I like benchmarking stuff like just all the time, right? So like the multi-threading in Python's okay, and you've got twisted framework, and that's kind of cool. But like usually it's to a singular thread, and like you've got the issues of the GIL. Multi-processing, I think if I remember correctly, it moves away from the GIL a little bit, which is nice. But then you don't have some of the safety that comes around with it. I was like, I just wish they spent a little more time on that type of stuff, right? Sorting it out, because I think we've kind of hit a maximum in terms of gigahertz. We've got like amazing new chipsets coming out that are ARM based. Like you've got CPU stacking as a concept coming up as well in the future. But it seems like the common trend is more cores, right? And we've had that for a while. Like my gaming PC is like 32 cores or 48. I think it's 48 cores, including virtual.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that. And
yeah,
with you run into that issue where using multiple threads in Python is more complex than it should be. And we had that when we were doing using like Locust, and even before that I wasn't using Locust because we weren't introduced to it, and I was writing my own like little load testing piece in Python. That's right, I had to populate. I was doing a demonstration where I was populating a DynamoDB table with 1 billion entries. And so I wrote basically a massive loop that just looped and inserted rows into DynamoDB. And I was trying to use threading in Python. And that was like, I was like, oh, this doesn't work the way I expect it to work. And yeah, it was a lot of fluffing around.
I can see we've got a mobile developer here as well, which is cool. You love Swift, Kotlin's next, right? So truth be told, right? Like I started with Objective-C. Like that was the first language I picked up back in the day. Big fan of Swift. I did a lot of mobile development. We haven't actually done any mobile development on the channel, but literally like, what I do most of the time outside of CDK is generally like support for Amplify and AppSync, working with customers, like build new apps and stuff. So like we should do a segment on that at some point, but I'm a really big fan of Swift. It's a really nice language to use. It kind of borrows a lot from other languages. Like I get like when I look at Swift code, I'm like, it's kind of like Python, but it's also kind of like, like C++, and it's a little bit like JavaScript, and it's a bit like, Objective-C. So like working with Swift is really fun for me, right? Because it kind of, it's a nice language to use. It is very mobile heavy, but I think Paul's called out as well, like, there was an unofficial SDK for AWS back in the day, Soto, I think it was, if I remember. Soto for Swift. Like recently, we've had the AWS SDK get released because, to be honest, if you do some digging, like AWS is a big place. We use lots of different languages. But there's some teams that are actually building like web, like web backends, like API services and stuff like that with Swift as well, right? Like, we build with C, C++, Java, like JavaScript, everything. But some teams have found that Swift in particular is very good for concurrency, and so like some services, like within AWS or Amazon are using that as well. If you do a bit of reading through the blogs, you can find them. But that's why we've got the AWS SDK now for Swift, right? Because we have been using it internally. The other thing is a lot of teams are using Rust. I always have to call out Rust, but that's been a very, very popular uptake, right? Like we've grabbed a couple of really cool people from the Rust community. They've come to work at AWS and come join us. And that's also why we had the Rust SDK quite recently too. You know, the AWS custom runtime for also supports Swift as well. So that's something else that we've got support for on the serverless side. And it's not ending there, right? There's a lot more coming on the Swift camp as well. So so people will be able to use on the back end, which is exciting. It's had a bit of a rough transition, to be honest. Like one of the large companies, I'm not going to say their names, like picked it up, created a really like awesome framework for it. But then it like just slowly kind of fizzled out or something. I don't really know, but like it kind of fizzled out. And then like what we've seen in the last 2 years is like a couple of like new open source projects. I think one's Vapor, if I remember correctly. And you know, internally, like we wrote the Smoke framework, which has been open source as well. Let me get a link to that actually. This was written by a couple of people in Amazon, including like a fellow Melbourneite who's living in America at the moment, but he was back in Melbourne a couple of months ago. But the Smoke framework is like completely written in Swift, right? It uses Swift Neo behind the scenes, and it's like a backend framework where you can write APIs and stuff. And then, you know, with the SDK now being available, we could talk to AWS services. So complete detour, I know. Actually, shoot, we're running out of time. But the detours are fun, right? Like, shall we continue this a little bit? Let me look at my calendar. Let me see.
We can go for a few more minutes.
Yeah. So anyways, like what I've got here is I ran a CDK synth command, right? And that synthesized hopefully like a few more resources for me. Maybe not at this stage yet. But what I might do is I might race through and I might show it off with a Lambda, right? Like I've done that in the blog. I'm going to do a bit of copy pastoring to get there really, really fast. So I'll just take from whatever in the blog here. The reason why it's not too exciting for me, this stuff, like in terms of like bringing in the Lambda, only because, you know, like I kind of just stole the Lambda from an AWS documentation. It was like an example, and I was like, okay, cool. So a Lambda that talks to a bucket. I'll just quickly borrow this code here, right? And then I'm going to create an API gateway here as well. I'm missing some of the libraries, so I'm just going to have to quickly do a couple of installs. Great. That is not what I want. Yep. Let's just try this manually. So I'm going to bring in AWS. Like, what is it going to be? It's going to be Lambda. And then I'm also going to have to bring in API gateway as well. That's right. Quickly do some imports on that. So the Lambda we're going to reference as just underscore Lambda. Typing really sucks today. I've stopped using my mechanical keyboard and I've got like a membrane keyboard. I quite like using it, but I feel like it's slowing me down at this minute. API gateway.
It's just like a noisy exhaust on a performance car or something, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Makes it feels like you go faster because you're making noise.
Hey, APIs are fast, Paul.
APIs are fast.
You get that reference. Yeah. Okay, cool. So did that install? Is it IntelliSense just being annoying for me? Maybe it is. Anyways, Lambda is not defined. Just save the file.
You imported as underscore Lambda?
Yeah, underscore Lambda. Let me. Yeah, actually, that is an issue. No, but I was wondering why API Gateway was showing strangely as well, right? Like everything to look nice. So this Lambda function, yeah, this looks better. Okay, so it's just like I needed to save the file. Like what I need to do here is just fix this up very quickly. So this is going to be like API Gateway, REST API, that should fix it up. And the other thing is I'm going to have to create like a subfolder as well, right? So
for the actual code of Lambda
yeah,
itself.
for the code itself. So just create that Lambda folder very quickly. And then like I'll just copy paste this JavaScript Lambda that I borrowed from the AWS website. So like what did I use as a naming convention for this widgets.js? Okay. So I'll just copy paste that in there.
I think that reference is going to the wrong folder because it's got CDK fun in it.
Yeah, I got to fix that. That was my last thing that I knew that I had to fix up. So it's just going to be CDK devs in the shed. That should be good to go. And so if I do a synth again, let's just see if I get those resources created. So it looks like I got a bunch of resources created, right? We can pick this up another week, but what I will do is I'll just quickly dive into the folder, right? And you can see that there's a lot more that's created here. Like my bucket is now created, and so that's just using my bucket name from that existing CloudFormation. I've preserved the logical ID, so it hasn't really appended anything to the end of that. But I've also got like this handler, right, for the Lambda. So like this is a Lambda. So if I go into the file, what I should see is I should see another resource. Yeah, here we go. So widget handler. So this is actually like grabbing, so it's not using the variable or the object that like this Lambda is like referenced to, but like it's using that second name. So it's used widget handler. And then, you know, this is kind of like when I was talking about IDs, you have a construct ID. So this construct ID is going to be unique to the stack, which is really important. The reason why is because I might like have a, like I might turn this into like a subclass, and I might want to generate this file a few times, right? Like I want to basically like leverage this infrastructure that I'm creating like for 2 or 3 different things with an account. So when I run a CDK synth command, it's then going to append a slightly different ID. It's going to append like 8-digit hashes on the end of each of these resources that I'm creating. And that means that they're unique. And it means that if I reuse the construct, the name's going to come out different every single time. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense to people. But this is why when we look at the widget handler, you've got that hash on the very end. But it's really cool in the fact that now I can use this resource and I can create a whole bunch of these resources. And each time the name's going to be unique, but I'm still getting that, I'm still using that same naming convention like in my CloudFormation. So that's something that's really cool for CDK, right? Like you can also leave the names blank and the CDK is going to auto-define its own name. It's going to be really long and really randomized as a whole. So I do like to have descriptive names added here. But this is one of the things.
In theory, random names shouldn't make any difference. But in reality, when it'll come down to like troubleshooting. Like when you're trying to troubleshoot and work out what is happening, in an environment that was operating perfectly, it doesn't really matter what things are named. Well, when something's not, or you're trying to dive into something, it can be difficult to like correlate, you know, numbers and random strings to like what specific resources are. Like if you see a spike or something on a dashboard and there's nothing that, no sort of naming convention, will be difficult to determine what is going on in what area.
Yeah. And you know, like this might look like hard coding to some, but you know, it's not really hard coding. It's more like that descriptive troubleshooting name that Paul mentioned. But like at the end of the day, it is going to be a unique resource, a unique ID that's generated. like each time you generate the CloudFormation. So that's one of the gaps. Like people like, how do I do parameter mapping and this and that? And it's like, well, you're actually working like with these objects that you create with CDK, right? And those objects are really like the pieces of infrastructure that you've got. Then you can use those around the CDK code, right? Like I can like now leverage this bucket with my Lambda, and then when the synth command happens, it kind of like it just regenerates everything as CloudFormation, adds in that suffix, that randomized 8-digit hash on the ends, and then you're kind of in that more traditional mode. Like, so this then will be like referenced in a bunch of different places, right? My bucket that was created will be referenced within this as well. So you can see the references here. This bucket is probably not what I want, right? Like if I wanted to like really do this properly, I probably don't want to preserve the logical ID, right? Because S3 buckets should be unique. And so like theoretically, if I ran that again, like it would put the hash on the end of that bucket then, and then, you know, that's now being controlled like the naming convention through like the way that CDK works. And so within your CDK construct, you're using these objects. But if you need to refer to existing infrastructure, like you can do that as well, and you can load them in, and you just point to them by the infrastructure resource name that you've got in your existing CloudFormation. And so that's kind of like a really super quick speed tour for CDK because we got so distracted, Paul. We can do a lot more on this like later on, right? Like one of the things is like rather than just importing existing CloudFormation, like you might want to pull in an existing VPC, and you can use like from lookup to do that. So from lookup will allow you to find like a VPC or a subnet. So you just basically go like EC2 VPC dot from lookup, and then like you just put the string in, which would be like test VPC or whatever you have named your VPC. And then you could do like the same command, but with attributes on the end to pull the subnet. You could do the same command, but application load balancer from lookup, for example. So all those common resources that you might have sitting in an account that might not have CloudFormation, but you still want to access and like build on top of, those are going to be accessible by CDK, right? The last thing I might say, to note, go through the blog because we just ran out of time, right? But the identifiers blog might be interesting as well, like because I go through a little bit more detail on the identifier side of the equation. But the last thing to note is CDK is going to generate all these resources for you, right? And you can do it in a pipeline, which is really good practice. So you can execute this when you could submit this to your Git repository, right? Like, and then like you could have 3 branches: a UAT branch, a dev branch, and a production or a main branch. And then whenever you move code to any of those branches, you can have a webhook set up to then like, within your pipeline, then execute and build this infrastructure and update this infrastructure in an automated fashion. And you can scope things down in terms of permissions. Like, this application that's going to be deployed in my pipeline should really only talk to S3 and Lambda. And so you can scope down the permissions of like what can be created in the pipeline too. So you've got some control over the infrastructure that's going to be generated. The other thing is like CDK itself, like one of the cool benefits, because I'm speeding up because we've gone massively over. But CDK also works on like giving the most granular minimal scope permissions as well. So like this Lambda actually needs to write to this bucket, so I can just use a grant read write. So as a developer, like this is awesome because, like I love IAM, but sometimes I get stuck in IAM land and it's like, what is it that's gone wrong? What's the role that I'm missing, right? And
everybody has always gone admin to try and debug a problem.
Yeah, that's right. So like you don't want to set like admin permissions just so it deploys. But it's nice that I can just like simply go like, I want it to be readable, I want it to be writable. This is the permission scope, and it's going to do like the minimal scope permissions once it creates that resource in my account. So happy to do more of it on another week, but I do know that we've gone over time. Let us know in the chat. Happy to cover other subjects. We have a couple of guests coming up in future weeks. I know some people want to see more IoT. Some people want to see some Redshift. We have some of those things planned out. But let us know what you'd like to see in the chat, and I might just quickly hand over to you, Paul.
One thing while I've, I'm thinking, look it up because I know that you're doing a presentation on application development at PyCon, so you might want to like just share the links to that if people are interested. And I'll just share one last meetup that's happening in like 5 hours from now. So it's 6 o'clock. So at 6 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, the AWS programming and tools meetup is having an event tonight. And so that's a hands-on workshop. So where people are encouraged to come along and work through the workshop that's been set up. It's a fully virtual event. And so that's around establishing guardrails with AWS config across AWS accounts. So if people are interested, come along to that. There will be a presenter that will go through and walk everybody through what's happening, but everybody's encouraged to do it, work along as part of that lab. So there's a lab that's available there and you can work through that. So yeah, I think that, it was a good session this week. Matt's put his session up there for PyCon. Maybe just give a quick intro to what you'll be talking about there.
Yeah, so one of the things is like most of the apps that I've worked on start as like side projects on weekends, and then they kind of like evolve from that. And so one of the things that I'm like really constantly like I constantly think about is like when I talk to some customers, it's like they have a really good understanding of what they want the end state of the application to be. But usually like regardless of like what happens, things are going to be a lot more fluid than that. And the end state sometimes holds them back from really, there's too much work to do, right? And so it really holds that project being able to be delivered or rolled out on time, or it brings up the complexity of them starting. So I wanted to kind of get across the idea of just start simple and let your project grow and pivot to, what your project needs. I think those are things that like we kind of take for granted, a lot of us, but sometimes it just needs to be, thought about as well. Like minimal viable product just to get out to the market is completely acceptable. And, you're going to have to rework technical debt in that process to bring it up to like production level and do a bunch of stuff. But, that journey is worthwhile, like because you see success so quickly, right? You see a couple of users using the app, it gets you excited. People want to scale it out in ways that you hadn't thought about as well. So I'm giving a talk on Friday at PyCon on that, and I'm going to talk through like one of the real apps that I've worked on that has had that in the past. But yeah, the end meaning of it, the end point of it is really just encouraging people to build and let things evolve versus trying to have the perfect masterpiece application at the start.
So yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks everybody for coming along today. Thanks for all the interactions. Look forward to all your feedback, and we'll see you again the same time, same place next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.